Hello again. Welcome to another podcast of the Bible Message with Pastor Ron Clark. We're going to pick up in Genesis 25 with a momentous occasion, and even many people who don't really study the Bible, they've heard of this, where Jacob tricks Esau out of his birthright. So you know from earlier in chapter 25 that the two young men had been very opposite in their characteristics. Is that Esau was a man of the fields, a hunter and outdoorsman, and Jacob was one who would was dwelling in tents and a little bit more civilized in a way, and he was called mild or even tempered, and this really shows something of the kind of calculating mindset that he had, that he was always an operator. And so growing up in the East, we use the word operator for people who would be able to maneuver things in business or in the community or with other people, and so that was Jacob. That was Jacob, and we see that uh, put on display here very well in this section in Genesis 25, 27 and following. So first we have the setup, and then the scheme, and then the scene. And we're going to see this same three-part drama in the chapter 27, with the time that Jacob uh, tricks his father into giving him the blessing that the firstborn should receive. So we're going to see where all the family members are wrong, and it's kind of interesting to notice this, because in a lot of situations we're trying to figure out, is this person right, or is this nation right, or is that business doing the right thing, or is this person who's claiming to be oppressed, is that really the case, or did they bring this on themselves because they were totally foolish? When we look at this, where there are two or more competing groups together, what we need to realize is that sometimes one may be partly right, both may be partly right, but it's also possible that everyone involved is wrong, and they're not really doing what would honor God. We see that in this setting, and then later in chapter 27 with the blessing that is done. So the setup here is verse 29. Now in chapter 25 of Genesis. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. He felt like he was just dying and starving. So the setup, and Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom, which means red. And so he may have had a red tint to his hair too, and he was very hairy. So that's the setup, is that Esau comes in from the field, famished, needing water, needing something to drink, something to eat. And what it later says is that he was despising his birthright at the end of verse 34. Now, what this puts on display is the kind of profane person, earthy person that he was. They live free according to their natural senses and desires, and they gratify their desires. So they have natural desires, they gratify them, and they have little or no regard for God's desires. That's what a profane person is that they bring down good things to an earthy base level. And that's actually where we get our word profanity. And we sometimes mix up profanity with cursing. Cursing is actually has to do with either charging God with something or um, blaming God for something or making some claim about God that is really preposterous because of what God has revealed about himself. That's blasphemy. So when the some of the Pharisees blamed Jesus' works on Satan's power instead of on the Holy Spirit's power, they were committing blasphemy. So that's what blasphemy is. But profanity is when someone takes something that's good and just makes it utterly dirty, filthy, and considers it just common. Okay, so that's why many of the words that we consider profanity are really just kind of gross abuses of more natural things. But a profane person is someone that just goes after their natural desires and their senses, and that's the main thing. And they have little or no regard for God's desires. And so we see that with Esau here, and Jacob knows this. He knows this. It's a perfect example of someone, and whenever we have a major weakness in our character or our behavior, someone else can use that to provoke us further. And anyone that's grown up in a big family knows how this works. When one sibling knows that another one just can be provoked this way, they will sometimes just do it, just simply to do that. And it goes back and forth that way. And some big families have big challenges with that. And God bless the mothers and fathers that are training them to try to get those uncivilized savages to become more civilized and mature. But here we have Jacob fully aware of what Esau is like. So when Esau comes in just totally famished, he needs something. Um, Jacob says to him, "Sell me your birthright as of this day." Now, the way he says this um, just shows how Jacob probably talked about this with Esau before, and he also knew that Esau didn't regard it or respect it that much. He was just going ahead day by day with his own desires. And so the setup just shows how uh, this setting of the favoritism of the parents toward each of the sons, and that Esau uh, was very much this kind of an emotional and earthy, desire based person. Jacob knew Esau was like this, so the scheme was right in front of him. He knew Esau so well that he took advantage of him. So, um, what happens is Esau gets caught in the trap. So Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die, so what is this birthright to me?" So in the moment, he gets just brought to the point of realizing that if I don't get something to eat soon, I feel so bad. I, he's just sort of out of control with it. And Jacob just eggs him on. So Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he Esau swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob, and Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils, and then he ate and drank and arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So Esau gives up his birthright to Jacob. Now, this was a trick, this was a scheme, this was where Jacob shows how he could maneuver and he could be an operator. But this was obtaining it outside of God's uh, way of doing things. And yes, Jacob was supposed to receive the blessing and be the son of the promise in the chain of the family. But God had to work with this because Jacob was wrong in doing this. So Esau, though, gave it up himself. Please notice that, yes, Jacob maneuvered. He manipulated him. And he provoked him to the point that he gave it up. But notice that Esau gave it up. Esau is responsible for giving it up. Now, this was not unusual in the ancient world in the assigning of a birthright to another family member. That was done in some cases, and it was done agreeably. But in this case, Jacob just schemed until there was a point where he could trick Esau to give it. And Esau's response was he didn't care about it very much at the time. This is an important thing to recognize in each of our lives. And it's something to try to get across to a young person in your family. There are some things that are important in life and should not be neglected. And some people will neglect those important things, and then sometime later, the regret will set in. Now that happens to Esau here. We see him regret it later. But in the meantime, he was not respecting his birthright. He wasn't concerned about that. He was just concerned about his own desires day by day. So it's very sad to notice how this all fit together and that everyone was wrong in this. The favoritism from the two parents, the competition between the two sons, the profane, earthy priorities of Esau instead of recognizing what was important to God, and then Jacob's manipulation to get something that he did see the value of it and may have been aware of what the Lord had said to Rebekah, his mother, when they were in the womb. And he may have realized that that will be so, but here he is acting on it according to his own wisdom and ways and causing greater damage. And sometimes we even choose to do things because it seems like that's what we ought to have, but then we use a method to get it that really doesn't honor God. And that is also wrong to do and has consequences to it. So here we see the setup, the scheme, and the scene where Esau gives up his birthright to the scheming Jacob, and this will have consequences later. So, Genesis 25. Thank you for joining me in this part of the Bible message.